Hey folks, Lance Wolosek, Product Agronomist. I cover most of northern Wisconsin, or all of northern Wisconsin, and then most all of northern Minnesota. So this year, I want to summarize a little study that we had done across 3 locations in Wisconsin, studying the lodging effect and what kind of effect that mid-season lodge has on soybean yield. We know that it does cause some challenges mechanically for harvesting the soybeans, but what is actually the loss to that overall yield when you lodge these beans? So when we think about lodging, we would consider that anytime you have a plant over a 45-degree angle lean, that it would be considered a lodging variety or unacceptable in terms of harvest standability. So when we came to put the experiment together, we wanted to get the beans lodged to at least a 45-degree angle, but not completely lay them flat on the ground. And we wanted each location that we tested to have varieties that had decent standability, because we wanted to eliminate the effect of a variety that already has weak standability for harvest standability. So we chose 3 varieties in 3 locations. We tested it in the Central Sands region irrigated environment, the kind of the north central geography and the Highway 29 corridor, and then also in the Chippewa Falls area, in varieties range from 1.1 to 1.8. So interestingly enough, when you had a variety that was weaker on white mold, actually the lodge effect of yield loss from lodge actually increased. So we seen that as the white mold score and tolerance reduced, and you lodge the soybeans, the white mold incidence increased, which compounded together with 2 reasons. One, you put the senescing flowers actually closer to the heaviest spore load for the white mold fungi, and you also reduce the amount of airflow in that canopy. So we completely, not completely, but you greatly reduced how much air movement to keep that canopy dry, and we know a wet canopy increases the amount of white mold incidence that you would have the longer that canopy can stay wet. So on those locations where we had heavy white mold, the yield loss averaged over 9 bushels per acre where we lodged those soybeans. We lodged the beans mid-August, so we were well into those mid-reproductive stages. We were moving into a pretty important critical period of filling the pods. And then the least amount of yield loss from lodging actually came from the varieties that had 0 white mold in the plot and the strongest varieties on white mold. So there is a compounding effect to lodging and white mold that actually increases the yield loss that you could have. But when you look at the locations without any white mold at all, the yield loss reduction was actually 4 bushel per acre. So we went from 9 bushel loss on a field that had heavy white mold pressure. We increased the yield loss by 9 bushel lodging it, and then when we had no white mold, we actually reduced it by as much as 4 bushel per acre. So when you summarize all the locations together, we had a 6.45 bushel yield loss on lodged soybean varieties. This is kind of some of the first data that I'd ever seen put together on what kind of impact lodging has. It's always a challenge mechanically to harvest the soybeans, so you have that frustration on lowering your efficiency when you're getting the beans off these farms. But then also, what really truly is the loss by stressing that plant and not allowing it to be upright? You lower the amount of photosynthate, the amount of sunlight, that solar radiation that you can capture on those canopies. The canopy is the solar panel. That's the big energy producer for that plant. So we reduce it by taking those solar panels and lowering them to the ground and not being wide and open to capture as much sunlight as possible. Sunlight creates yield, and that is one reason we lost yield as well. So you have the white mold effect, but then we have the canopy out of its original or normal orientation that reduces the amount of light capturing ability. So very neat study. We look to maybe take this a little step further in the next year, but like I said, 6.45 bushel was the loss that we had experienced from this lodge study. So I'm standing here at one of the lodging study fields that we had done this year. And the first thing that you'll notice when I turn this camera around is you're gonna see that the incidence of white mold in these studies has gone up. We were looking purely at yield and performance of what is the effect of lodging, some of those lodgings deep into the reproductive stages, how does that impact yield? And I can tell you from what some of the observations of these locations is that we've brought up the white mold incidence higher. So not only is there possibly a effect on yield purely from standability of that product due to a pounding rain or a heavy wind situation, but the fact that the white mold incidence went up is definitely going to play into the yield as well. So this bean right in front of me, this has not been lodged. We did not simulate a lodge on this. You can see the standability is pretty well, doing pretty well. There is a little bit of white mold in this. It's probably hard to see from the video, the camera angle. But I'm going to keep backing up here and show you. This is the exact same variety. And you'll see right about now, you're going to start to see the lodging effect come into play a lot more, and you're going to see that white mold incidence really dramatically come up. So there will be a significant yield impact just on the increased incidence of white mold. If you can see, if I can point ahead, right there is the line where we delineated the lodging, so simulated a heavy lodge situation versus natural standability back there. And you can see there is a lot more black remnants and leaf carcasses left from white mold killing that plant versus that plot up there that is not lodged at all. So that's exciting to see. We'll have that data to kind of overlay as well, score these plots. But I'm really excited to get some of the yield data off. So thanks, guys.
That concludes this Pioneer Agronomy video podcast. Visit our page on pioneer.com and follow us on Twitter and Facebook for more agronomy insights.